This is Kev Dog, and you're watching Bitchin' Rides Done Right. Duh.
This car was already built by Strictly Street Rods. He got wiped out in the four-way
You have the most talented guy in there, but if he's not driving, then the rest of the crew is in the back.
This show, top 5 in America.
Okay, we have David Sancewich of Oregon City.
Yes.
He's got this absolutely gorgeous, deep red, super shiny Dodge Charger. It's a
1968.
68. So tell the story, how'd you get this?
Well, the story is it's actually always been an Oregon car. I am the third owner. Bought it with 98,000 original miles on it. The story behind it is that the gentleman I bought it from saw the car in King City, Oregon. Followed the lady in the car home. The lady was about 85 years old.
King City is a retirement area, so that's the place where you want to buy your cars, right?
If you could find a good one anymore. But stepped out at her apartment and said, I'd like to purchase your car. And the lady turned around and said, I can't sell it to you because it's the last car that me and my husband bought as a couple together, and he recently had passed away.
Oh, no.
But she took the guy's name and number and said, I will call you if things change. A couple of years passed, and he's having dinner and gets a call from the gal's daughter. And the gal's daughter says, my mom passed away. We looked at her will, and there's a note in here that if we were to sell the car, you're the first person that you would like
No
you to
way.
call.
That's
and
amazing.
so one night over dinner, he got the call and said, I'll buy it. And next morning, he purchased the car from the lady.
Wow.
Second part of the story is he drove it for about 6 months. The water pump went out in the motor. He got frustrated and he let it sit in his dad's field for about 4 years, and then I bought it. So it was a completely done car. It was a green car with green top, 318 motor, column shift, just a regular grocery getter from 1960.
Probably never touched, never restored, just all original. Was it?
All completely original. Everything was original. What was interesting is that when I started to work on the car and I took it apart, because my theory is because she was an old lady who likes to ride brakes, the red light brake light lenses had actually melted a bit from the brake lights being on as much as they were for the life of the car.
That's a great story. I love that. So what did you do? What was the first thing you did?
Well, the first thing I did was I took the 318 out, and I had built a stock plus 440 for it, and my plan was just to put some nice paint on it, put a nice 440 in the car, and just clean it up and drive it. Plans changed. I built the 440. I put about 70 miles on the car with that engine, and then I just started building it up. And as most car owners may appreciate, as soon as you start putting one nice part on the car, you can't put old parts back on it because then it detracts from the overall look.
That's that snowball effect. It just keeps growing and growing and growing, right?
That is absolutely right. And so does the money, and so does the time, and so does the blood, sweat, and tears, as we all know.
Yeah. So you started kind of in the motor part of it, and going from there. Is that where you sort of concentrated your efforts at first?
Yeah. So the story is I actually had a 440 built for it with about 400 horsepower on it, ran on pump gas. And then while I was working on the car, I got this brain idea of what would it take to put a supercharger on the car and make the motor come alive. Well, in talking to the engine builder, he said rather than put a supercharger on your current motor, the best way to go about it is to rebuild an entire engine. That took about 2 years. We went through about 2 or 3 different engine blocks. By the time we got all the bugs worked out and we put the right parts in it, we ended up at 1,100 horsepower on the dyno, 1,000 foot-pounds of torque on the dyno. The fast forward is now that I have this 1,100 horsepower engine, I wasn't going to put it into a 300 horsepower car.
Yeah.
So then the rail bar had to be built, and the frame had to be welded, and all the suspension had to be upgraded.
Yeah. It's funny how people, when you have your projects, are willing to recommend that you do, the maximum amount. You couldn't just rebuild your old 440. You had to have a whole new one in, right? So, but that's the right way to do it. I mean, I'm sure it's got it's all beefed up, and the the crank and everything is beefier and.
Well, the real challenge with particularly these Chargers and these Chrysler B-bodies is they are unibody cars. Unlike the GMs of the time, they do not have a full frame. So my fear was, in addition to the safety issue, 1100 horsepower motor in a unibody is going to cause the body to actually tweak because the front end goes one way and the back end doesn't want to go.
Right.
The doors become misaligned, and then just from a safety issue, putting a roll cage in case, if I ever put traction on the back of the car and it were to roll or were to flip over. Wanted to make sure I was protected when I did that.
Sure. So have fun and try to live through it at the same time, right?
That's right. I mean, there's a lot of ways to be safe and to make a car fast, and you can do both.
So is there any custom work done on the body in terms of restyling, or is it it's immaculate? But did you change anything in terms of styling?
No, the body is relatively stock. I wanted it to look that way. I have a stock interior, stock seat covers, and I put the stock console back in, and then upgraded all the suspension components, all the coilovers, the rear end, 4-link suspension, the roll bar, the motor, and even the oiling system all had to be upgraded and customized. What I really wanted to do was put a powerful motor in the car and still be able to get the hood closed. Many who own these Chargers and these types of cars, it's very difficult for a true Mopar fan to cut a hood open on a Charger. They look good as they are. Because the sheet metal, that when I got the car, the sheet metal was so solid, it didn't make sense to cut into the body, including the rear end. I have pretty wide tires on the back of the car, and one of my concerns was I did not want to tub the car. I did not want to cut out the wheel wells. So we measured and we measured and we measured again and we measured a third time. We had a Dana 60 put in the back, built by Strange Engineering, and then we custom built the wheels from Chip Foose to fit the wheel wells and fit the rear end, so I didn't have to do any cutting on the car.
Oh, nice. So that's quite a bit. What's the size of those rear tires? I mean, they're wide.
Yeah, they're 315, 17, 35s. Very wide rear tires. I'm very happy to say they actually fit like they were supposed to, which, as most car builders know, is sometimes trial by fire. You think you got it right, and you put the wheel in there, and it rubs on a wheel well or rubs on the inside of the wheel. But it worked out pretty well with this car.
That's one of the tougher things to do, where you're trying to get the offset on the wheel right and measure everything. It is. I know on my car, I measured that thing about 25 times, and there's still, and there's differences from left to right? Did you have that?
Yeah, most factory cars, as you know, the rear ends don't sit perfectly centered in the rear of the car and could be off to the left or the right side of the car. The benefit of putting in a 4-link suspension and with coilovers in the back is it gives you so much more adjustability on the rear end from a frontward and a backward and a left and a back, or left and side, and in and out. And so you can make those little, half-inch to 1-inch tweaks if you need to with the rear end by changing the suspension. The other thing I did to the car was I actually lightened up the front end by taking out the stock K-member and the stock shocks and the stock front suspension. I took about 600 pounds off the front of the car.
Wow.
Put a chrome moly tubed front end K-member on it with coilovers, and now I'm running torsion bars on the front and back of the car so that when I do hit the gas and I am on a street, it goes straight.
Nice. All right. So you've done all the undercarriage, and that's all beefed up, but it looks pretty stock from the top, pretty stock from the interior. Does it have an 8-track?
No, it doesn't, but it does have the original AM radio, which does work. I did put the speaker back in, and I did plug it into the AM radio, and if I want to, I can listen to whatever AM stations are on at the time.
Okay, cool.
I figured with the sound of the motor that I'm not going to have time to listen to a big fancy radio as it is.
I know. Well, see, you're one step ahead of me, because I put a ton of money in the stereo, and I never listened to it because I want to hear the car, and you just had that. You knew that right away.
Well, yeah, it's one of the things I did think about with a Supercharger, and then one of the things I did when I had the roll bar put in was I put in stainless steel TIG welded exhaust, 3-inch from the headers all the way back. I don't like to deal with rust, as do all car owners, I would imagine, don't like rust. The standard exhaust system, the welds they use, they will rust if they sit out in moisture. Yeah. It's not a sight to be seen. So we put stainless steel exhaust in, put Borla mufflers on the car, and when the thing runs, you can't hear yourself think, let alone hear the radio. It is relatively quiet, but putting in a big stereo system didn't make sense when the car idles and when you're stepping on the gas.
Yeah. Any cutouts or anything on the exhaust?
There's no cutouts, but I did put an X pipe in the middle to help make it a little more efficient.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been asked if I will put cutouts on it, but with these Superchargers, I'm also running 110 leaded octane race gas with the engine. It's the best that it ran on the dyno. It did make sense to put cutouts on it. It's loud enough as it is with the exhaust out the back.
So you run race gas. What's the compression?
Without the Supercharger, compression's about 8.5 to 1. With the Supercharger at full speed, we dynoed it. About 20 pounds of boost. It's running about, I think it's 15 to 1 or higher when it was making power. We actually had to shut it off because it hit 6,000 RPM, was still making power. Most of these big blocks don't like to be revved very high.
So you just dial down the boost when you run regular gas in it, street, or do you...
Yeah, the original setup of the engine was to run 92 octane pump gas and to have water injection. One of the things you deal with when you deal with turbos and Superchargers is cooling down the charge into the motor. We ran the water pump gas and water injection on the dyno, and we just found that the motor wasn't that happy. When we switched it over to 110 leaded race gas, the motor came alive. We hit the 1,100 horsepower. We hit the 1,000 foot-pounds of torque. We went through 3 engine blocks trying to build the motor up, and finally, with all the forged parts and custom pieces we put in, the motor's extremely happy, and it's really fun to drive.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I mean, this thing just must really take off and go. So, nice job. So, what's your favorite part? I mean, what's your favorite? Like, is there a detail or something that most people don't know about?
There's a lot of parts. It's hard to show the underside of the car when it's sitting on the ground. But if you were to look at the rear end and the torsion bars and the coilovers and all the work that went into the suspension and underneath the vehicle, I just love it from front to back. I love the way the paint turned out. I have 1,500 plus hours in painting it. I used the guys up at Hot Rod DreamWorks to do the final paint job and the final assembly. They did an awesome job, but did about 80% of the work myself, which really is nice when you get in the car and you start it. And when something goes wrong or something goes right, you can take credit and you can take fault for it at the same time.
And you can always fix it. You know exactly. Usually, you know what's in it, and you know how to fix it. So that's you're way ahead of the game right there.
Well, that's right. And one of the things all car owners probably think about is whether to use metallic paint or solid base paint. If you're going to drive the car on the street, guess what? It's going to get chipped. It's going to get worn out. If something's going to happen to it, it'll get scratched.
Yeah.
Solid base paints, such as the one on my car, much easier to touch up than a metallic based paint. Not to say they don't look any different. They both look great, but there's a difference in maintenance going forward.
It's quality. I mean, there's the looks and there's quality, and regardless if it's solid or if it's candy, quality always comes out, and this is just clearly a quality job. So.
Yeah, it's the amount of labor that goes in prior to a paint job, and to be fairly honest, one of the underlook areas, in my opinion, is the quality of clear coat that you put on the vehicle as well. You get what you pay for. If you pay for a really nice clear, it's going to turn out really well. It buffs really well. It doesn't break down in the UV like a lot of them do. This has top-of-the-line Glazerite on it. I'm glad that I spent the money because it shows up well when you're outside in the sunshine, showing the car off at car shows.
Nice. Well, what a beautiful car. Well, I sure appreciate your time. Thanks, David, and have fun driving it.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.